Hello there and welcome to Good Morning Sri Lanka. You're here with me, Harit, on this Thursday, the 4th of October. We indeed have a very interesting show coming up for you. Just before headlines, we have a very interesting discussion on today about something that is happening today. The first US presidential debate with regard to the current elections that are going to be held on the 6th of November, and we are going to have an interesting discussion on what is going to be the impact of this debate as well as further issues with regard to the elections. But before that, as always, we head into headlines. We have plenty of interesting stories here. We have Honorable Minister S.B. Disanayaka's face, well, contemplating. I think he has a lot of issues at hand. Vital discussions to be made today between the government and FUTA to end the university crisis. Ending the university crisis, well, we've been hearing about the end of the university crisis for a long time. Well, when is the end going to come? It says that these talks were initiated by the talks were initiated by one of the prelates who had made comment that this problem has to come to an end. It's the Malwatta Mahanayaka Thera, Most Venerable Tibbatuwe Siddharatna Thera, who had made initiative to stop this issue and make discussions to solve the problem. The minister, in fact, has commented here that his idea is to prioritize education, and it was in fact his initial plan to have 6% of the GDP for education, which is interesting news, and that the university is politicizing the matter. But at the end of the day, it's not about pointing fingers, it's about getting this crisis sorted and sorting out the problem, because the students are still suffering. The students are hanging around in court, the students don't have a job, the students don't have an education. Recently I saw some students doing various activities, fundraising, walking around without having anything to do, without having education where they should be in their schools. They are out in the roads doing nothing much. So this problem should be sorted, and this pointing of fingers necessarily should stop. Going on to another very important headline, we have that the election department and PAFREL is unhappy with the proposed electoral reform that we discussed a few days ago. As we discussed, the proposed bill is to suggest that the election system will have a composition of the first past the post system as well as a representative system. Now the issue here has been that the powers given under this bill are a bit extensive to the subject minister. The reason the election department and the PAFREL are unhappy is that the subject minister will have the ability to decide the borders within which is called the delimitation committees. That is, for example, to decide what are the borders that this certain area will have, and so on and so forth, which says it's not a democratically viable option, because that would necessarily lead to the politicization of the delimitation committee and leading, for example, more favorable area will be favorably limited within those boundaries, which is of course dangerous. And that, I think, that issue of the power to the subject minister is what the elections department is unhappy about. Also, of course, before we head into further headlines, we have today's match coming up, and I suppose everyone is gearing up. Firstly, I want to start off that the 2020 semi-final tickets are for sale today. If you don't have a job and if you don't have anything to do, you can head on to Thurston, or if you are in the job, you can quickly go in the morning, get a bit late, but grab those valuable tickets, because there are about 5,000 tickets available for both the semi-final and the final, and they are being sold from at Thurston College in the morning from 9 o'clock. It's going to be a spin war, as the headlines say here, because it is going to be the Pakistani spinners against the Sri Lankan spinners. In fact, sadly for me, I think they are contemplating of dropping our favourite Nuwan Kulasekara and even replacing him with Rangana Herath. Three specialist spinners, is that a good combination to go with? I guess our cricketers would know. Of course, interesting point that Daily Mirror makes here is that the home advantage Sri Lanka would have is necessarily lost, because we have not played a match at the R. Premadasa in a long time, and Pakistan has been playing all their matches, so it will be a very interesting game, a very heavy clash, and of course Pakistan will be heavily supported at R. Premadasa as well, as we have seen in the past, so it will be a heavy clash coming up. Not forgetting, of course, the South African and the Indian women have qualified for the 2014 2020 World Cup, and they have defeated Pakistan and Sri Lanka in the qualifier matches played at Braybrook grounds yesterday, and even the final with regard to that will be coming up very soon, and you can catch the action there as well. Further in sports, of course, the Dialogue Rugby League is happening, and we have here that Kandy has sounded a warning with a thumping win over the police, 53-8, a crushing win, of course, with Kandy showing their colors when they really matter, and of course showing how much, how dominative they can be. Of course, this season was the first time that the Kandy was dethroned by the Havelock Sports Club, and it was unfortunate that they could not continue their reign. But of course, Kandy showing that they can, of course, come back, because on the other side, the Havies have prevailed over the Upcountry Lions in a pretty much thrilling game, 32-31. It says it was an anticlimax at the park because everyone expected the reigning champions Havelocks to be pipped by the Upcountry Lions, who were newcomers to the A-Division League. However, they could not do so, and in the last minute, a 32-31 win for the Havies. So Kandy and Havies going on head-to-head with that. Of course, going on quickly to pretty interesting business entertainment news. Of course, the famous Shakespeare competition will be having its massive finale on Saturday, with 4 schools taking on each other from the boys and the girls schools respectively. We have here that Royal College and St. Benedict's College, which will both be performing Romeo and Juliet, and DS Senanayaka College and one other school will be in that final for the boys final, as well as Ave Maria Bishop's College and Girls High School Kandy, who will be doing Midsummer's Night Dream, and Gateway, who will be doing a take on The Winter's Tale by Shakespeare. Of course, an interesting point that the journalists bring up here is the fact that they have changed Shakespeare. It is a localized version of Shakespeare. Well, is the point really served when Shakespeare is made a localized version? Because isn't it the point of a Shakespeare drama competition that we inculcate the idea of Shakespeare and the drama of Shakespeare and the culture of Shakespeare in Sri Lanka? When we localize everything that we have, are we essentially reaching those goals? But then we can see a very set of very creative interpretations of the plays. Of course, some going a bit extra, which are not great. For example, Royal College have done a very naturalistic rendition of the Shakespeare play, which I would support personally, but I guess it's subjective as to whether you like Shakespeare in the classic form or a localized form. Also, quickly returning back to the headlines, another interesting story that we have here, that the Supreme Court has ordered the release of a suspect. The Supreme Court has said that he's been illegally and unlawfully held by the Terrorist Investigation Department, arrested on the 28th of October in 2008, and he has been held there, and the gentleman concerned has finally got justice. Well, 4 years down the line, of course, not very expedient, but still, nevertheless, he has been released. The discussion there has come about because there are a lot of pending cases where there is plenty of fundamental rights applications pending in court, where there are several similar suspects who have been arrested under laws of the prevention of terrorism and the emergency regulations of then. And after the repeal of the emergency regulations, why are these arrests being continued? And there is a lot of issue at hand, and of course the reconciliation process being highlighted these days. I think it needs to be, because it says he suffered pain of mind and humiliation for this illegal and unlawful detention, and these things should be attended to stop the issue being politicized and the people involved being, of course, victimized. Going on also quickly to another entertainment story. Of course, in my opinion, not so important. We have the hot stuff, so-called Christine and Rob back living together. For those Twilight fans, I suppose that would be a very happy ending. And after cheating on the 41-year-old director on Snow White and Huntsman, Kristen Stewart is back with Rob Pattinson, not Rob Stewart, and so wish them happy living together. But before we will, after the headlines here, we will come back on Good Morning Sri Lanka with a very interesting discussion on the US election and the POTUS. We'll see you in a bit. We have a very interesting discussion. As you said, the POTUS. The POTUS is not any code name, but is the President of the United States. And he is probably now the future President, or the future POTUS is probably arguing his case right now at the Denver University. And we have Ms. Anuradha Herath, who is the Director of the Sri Lanka College of Journalism, to have a discussion. Welcome, Anuradha, to Good Morning Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much, Harit.
So, Anuradha, what Exactly. Before we get into the center of this topic, let's discuss a little quickly what the US presidential election is like. What is the system? It goes from a primary, which is finished, and now it is the state of 1 month before the election. How is it voted in? How is the president voted in the electoral colleges and the House of Representatives, Congress, so many terms? Can you briefly tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, that's a very broad and lengthy question, I suppose. But yeah, I think people are quite familiar with the primary process now, since we here have also been.
It is where they select their candidate from both parties. Through an election in itself.
Right. It's a basic normal election, but each party, if now the Democratic Party didn't go through this because obviously President Obama decided to run again, and so then usually it's not contested within the party. But then the Republican Party did not have a candidate since they lost last election, and that's why they went through a primary process. State by state, you go through the process, and somebody has to come out winning majority of the states for them to become the nominee from that particular party. So that's the primary process.
And currently we have President Barack Obama running against Mitt Romney, and with his Paul Ryan being his vice presidential candidate, and Joe Biden following up with Obama. How is the election process? How does it happen? Is it any different to what we have here?
Now, from then on, after the candidates have been decided from each party, we go through, as you mentioned, this thing called the Electoral College, which is quite unique to the United States. And basically what it is, and there's a lot of detail if you really wanted to get into it, but in summary, the election is sort of divided into two separate sections. So if you watch, for example, some of the polling or CNN during the elections or something, you'll see two numbers, a percentage, and then this number overall out of 538, whether somebody's trying to reach this 270 mark, right? So that's what the electoral votes basically are. So the Electoral College is basically a collection of electors, which are basically made up of senators and representatives of each of the states. So that's what makes up the Electoral College. So in order to become president, you have to get the popular vote, which is what the people actually go and cast their ballot, which is that percentage number that we see, and you have to be voted president and vice president from the Electoral College. So usually the electors, the representatives and the senators, pledge to vote for the particular person from their party that wins the state.
It's a matter of convention.
But they're not legally bound to do so. So, I mean, it usually doesn't happen, but if you wanted to change your mind, you could, and you're not against the law or anything like that. And that's why in history we've had these couple of situations, I think 3 or 4 times, 2000 being the most famous one in our recent memory, where one person got the popular vote, but then another person got the electoral votes. And that's how that worked. So
it's very interesting, a unique system in fact. Now build up